Good day, folks. Welcome to WNY Coaches Chalk Talk here at Medaille College. We're here with three of our executive officers, Kelly Piper, Western New York Coaches Director of Sports Psychology and Wellness, Coach Blair Lipsitz, our Managing Director, and my name is Rich Jacob. Today, we are going to jump right into a discussion about being the student athlete and expectations. Maybe, Kelly, if we can come right to you and lay out this scenario, please.
So we're sharing, we have a local school district, that is struggling with, their youth athletic program and some of the academic rigors. And it's really limiting the amount of student athletes on that roster that are cleared to travel. And, so what does that really look like as far as, the values and how, our students are socialized coming up through the system to place emphasis on sport as their identity and not necessarily as much on academics. Where are they placing value in the time that they're spending? And what does that look like for the athletes that are traveling and are participating, and what pressure does that put on them? And also what messaging from our coaches, how do our coaches manage that to be able to allow kids to train and to get better, but to still hold, toe the line with them on expectations for their overall development.
Kelly, in this circumstance, the academic monitoring in this, with the system itself or in the athletic department, is there such a thing?
There is. The district has a policy around academic achievement, which, seems to be the right thing to do. These kids need to learn, for sure as they're coming up through that academics come first. So there is a line in the sand as far as the academic requirement for them to be allowed to participate and travel.
Great. And certainly we all understand student athlete and your student first. That's absolutely why you're here, right, in an institution on all levels. Mm-hmm. And here we're talking about junior high.
Right.
In this situation.
Right.
And so you wonder about clarity and expectation. I don't know if in this case, does each student athlete sign a contract of such?
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's, paperwork that comes home, and the
right.
kids do actually sign a contract for participation.
Do
right?
they take ownership in that contract? Or is it a contract that's like pre-made and given to them, like given every year, as opposed to, we talk a lot about developing core values and developing a team aspect to those kinds of contracts so that the team feels like they have ownership in it and they understand it and they know their expectations are set out instead of it being set out for them. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference there, do we think? Right. Even, at the junior high age even, like, we did that at the college level, and that's one way to create that buy-in for coaches and athletes alike.
Yeah. And I think that depends probably on the culture of the sport and the level that they're participating. Right. So I think, on a travel level or, if it's sort of more of an elite level team, there may be more buy-in and, candidly more thought kind of placed on that from the coaches to get that, the team to kind of buy into the system. I think, in particular, with this team, their junior high kids, and they're kind of just showing up. Is it a travel
team?
It's just a school.
With a school district.
School
okay.
Yep. Yeah. So
because that's a whole other can of worms you open when you get into a travel situation. If grades are something that they're looking at, and parents say, well, I'm paying for this, right? And we hear that a lot in travel sports outside of school. It's like, I'm paying for this. Their grades, you have nothing to do with their grades. But, should coaches, even at the travel level, care if their grades are good enough to continue to play?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's priorities, right?
Right.
Some moments,
especially junior high level, right?
Yeah. And Blair, the point you make about travel is very important because it's a priority. It's certainly a focus on the performance. It's a focus on the sport, and development for the sport. But my experience is that many coaches and or programs have an expectation and consequence
I would agree.
related to a report, an academic report, just like a school might. And certainly I think that we have to say that every coach's approach, every coach's philosophy, they will vary, even though they're in the same system. So it comes down to also leadership and expectation on the administrative level. I think here, where if the consequences were clear, that's why I asked about the contract. It's important to abide. By the contract and with the expectations accordingly, and then.
I think that makes it easier for the coach, right? To have to make the decisions. It's like, it's here. This is what it says. This is what we kind of have to go by. Everything, not only grades, but behaviorally, whatever's going on within the team. And then everybody feels a sense of trust and just like, okay, we know what to expect from our coach. He knows what to expect from us.
Very important.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly, with your unbelievable and remarkable experience in sports psychology, and we talk about this, in this case, academic behavior or responses to that kind of behavior. If you can talk, please, a little bit about the dynamic between the sports psychologist, yourself, and the coach, that relationship.
Yeah, I think that, first and foremost, someone who is coming from a neutral perspective, right? There's a lot of responsibility there to try and sort of see things from 30,000 feet, understanding the coach's perspective, knowing who you're sitting across from. Knowing their values and kind of understanding clearly where you fit as that professional in the system to be able to build trust, first of all, right? So in order to have real conversation with a coach who, at any level, whether they're volunteering, right, or how they're feeding their family, right? And kind of everything in between is, it's their life's work. And it's a very vulnerable place to be a coach. You're out there, right? And you're not playing, right? You have to turn
control freak in me is like
turn control over, right, to your athletes, right, in those moments. And so for the coaches to know that you have their back first and foremost as a human being, and that you want to do anything that you can to allow the team to be successful, and that really means having some candid conversations, right? So in order to be able to keep it real, talk about what you see it's going well, and also to be able to point out growth curves for coaches and interactions with the athletes and how to make the team better. I think a line in the sand for me is to never go technical. Never ever go technical.
Good for you.
Right? Because that's just not my place. And to just focus on observations and to always, keep the well-being of the coach and the student athlete as the first priority. The other thing that I think is important is in that professional relationship is to sort of understand what the goal is of that relationship from the get-go. So who's the client?
Between the coach and the player, you mean?
And the player. So how is that relationship fostered, right? Who's presenting that contract? Who's initiating that relationship, and clearly understanding what my role is with the team, right? And so that we don't get down the road and it becomes a question of, who are you working for kind of thing.
And talk about how difficult it is too, to have the relationships that you have with players, and then you also have a relationship with a coach, and the coach and the players have relationships, and you're sort of in the middle of all of that. And I think that's a really challenging place to be.
Yep.
And so talk a little bit about how hard that is.
Yep.
And how you sort of navigate that.
Well, I think rule of thumb is you never, ever throw a coach under the bus in front of an athlete. Never.
Or vice versa.
Ever,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, and they're just, again, you have to earn that trust. It has to be built over time. But at the same time, you don't want those conversations, if you're having conversations about how to navigate situations, you don't want them to happen in isolation, right? So how do you foster communication on both sides so that, the coach can have effective communication with the athlete or the athlete to the coach? So And I think that, for myself personally, from an ethical standpoint, I'm always clear that, the student athlete well-being is the top priority.
Yeah.
No, no matter who is, kind of bringing me into the fold, is that the outcome, the performance will happen.
Right.
If the student athletes are well, right, and, they're centered and they're their best selves, the performance will happen. So how do we get to that point, having real conversations that are, founded on trust, but can be candid, and sometimes difficult, that everyone's working towards the same goal.
Yeah. What kind of mental performance training are you doing with teams right now? What are the things that you're seeing? I don't want to say trends, but what are the things you're seeing that are really working, or things that, people are more passionate about now?
Sure. I would say probably one of the biggest topics is mindfulness, right? Yeah. And when people hear I was just talking to a staff yesterday about this, that people hear mindfulness and they think, you're sitting in a quiet room and you're meditating and you're listening to, right?
I was telling Rich the first time somebody came in, Dr. Eukelson, who I found out is famous in the sports psychology world after I left. He was yeah. So anyway.
Dr. Dave.
Yeah, he's awesome. He used to call he had like Euclidean nuggets of information that he would give us. But it's so funny, the first time he came in and he said, okay, everybody, we're gonna do some mindfulness. And we were like, who is this guy? Come on, And then within 5 minutes, we were more relaxed than we had been in months, Yeah. But yeah, anyway, awesome. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's definitely a part
perception,
of it, right? But, with so much circling around our athletes, social media, and never being able to sort of hit the off button. And so mindfulness exercises are a huge part of that, but I think just that mind shift of be where your feet are, right? As Ken Ravizza would say, be where your feet are, and helping athletes and coaches kind of understand how to be in that place. So, if an athlete comes in, show up to practice, and you can tell they're not themselves and they just failed a test earlier in the day, or they're an injured athlete who is, they're worried about, going to see the doc on Friday and whether or not they're going to get cleared. Wherever they're in that headspace, they're not where their feet are, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's becoming increasingly challenging with them being on their phones all the time and, never being able to sort of, truly be present. And so I spend a lot of time with our athletes on developing that skill set to compartmentalize their day, right? And sort of, shut the locker on the portion of their day they just came from, open the locker and be present, right? And how do you develop that skill set to just kind of, really tune in and be focused and present?
Do you think there's a parallel, and Rich, you can speak to this too, do you think there's a parallel between, I think this generation is so much better about discussing mental health and being more comfortable talking about issues that they're having or what's going on in their lives than even I was, 10 years ago, right? And do you think that there is a difference in coping mechanisms alongside that, and they're sort of like running parallel? Do we have better coping mechanisms, or is there just more that young people now are dealing with that we weren't dealing with 10 years ago in, social media and different things like that, different pressure? I don't know. Is that a loaded question?
No, it's not a loaded question. And Blair, I think, enter sports psychology.
Right. And that's why we're here, right? Is because of all of that.
Absolutely. So true and such an important topic. And I say, as a coach, as a sports psychologist, as a practitioner, everyone is unique in their approach. Everyone is unique in their philosophy. And what I'm quite impressed with Kelly is that you have wellness at the core of your work. And this is exactly what you're talking about, Blair, right? That it's on the field, on the ice, on the court, and what's happening for the performer, but it's outside.
Right.
It's social support. And Kelly, please talk a little bit more about your philosophy, because I think it's just right on point. And I want to also say, you commented a little before about the relationship in the coaches and the respect and the sensitivity you show. I think certainly fosters those kinds of successful relationships you have with coaches. And that's why, you're doing such great work at the University of Buffalo and also in your private practice.
Thank you. I think that, it's complicated.
Yeah, of course.
First of all, our life's work is with high performing people, right? And so there's an intensity there.
Equals pressure.
Yeah, equals
and let me
pressure.
say, can we remind the audience that we have a high-level performer in our midst? With,
Let's put former at the front of that.
our coach, Blair Lipsitz. Come on, again, I'll say it. We've said it on a couple podcasts, but we'll say it again, right? A 4-time NCAA champion with Penn State, Big Ten Player of the Year, professional career as a player, and then came back as Division I coach. So she's in our midst.
Oh, boy.
We were just talking earlier about how someone said the other day that Blair is volleyball royalty.
Yeah, there
I'm
you go.
embarrassed.
Yes.
I am now.
Nice.
Thank you for
I
that.
like that. I like that label. We'll get a T-shirt.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so I think that, first of all, just knowing, again, who you're sitting across from, that, we're high-performing people and, oftentimes perfectionistic, driven.
Control freaks.
Right? And so we...
Is that a negative term? I use it to describe myself, so I hope not.
Well, how about we call it a strength until it's overused?
There we go. There we go.
Very nice.
Right? So, being able to sort of step away from the performance side of it to offer people a safe space to just be humans first, right?
Right.
And I think that's refreshing to just sort of see people for how are you? Tell me about other areas of your life besides sport. If sport were not part of your life, who would you be? Whoa, right?
Yeah.
It's like
that
a record
identity
scratch.
piece is so hard.
Yeah, and just to sort of open the door for, other conversations, for them to understand that you see them as a whole person. That in itself can allow them, whether it's coaches or athletes, to just, feel like they can honor the space that they're in, even if it's a tough day. Come in and shut the door and say, I'm not sure that this is the right place for me. Maybe I need to transfer to another school. Or, I'm not sure if I want to do my sport again. Or coaches say, I'm not sure if this is right for, like, being able to explore
Right.
those scary pieces, those tough moments of conversation that you feel like you've spent your whole life working for this, right?
And have been told that's what you're working for your whole life, right?
Yeah, or how many of our student athletes show up to college working for a decade to get there and say, this is not wrapped in the pretty bow that I was expecting, or everybody told me that it was going to be. This is a grind.
Oh, we all called our parents preseason week 1 and said, absolutely not. I called my dad, and our whole crew called their parents, I think. And we were like, we cannot do this. This is so hard.
Yep.
Wow.
And I don't even remember exactly what my dad said, but in a nutshell, it was no, you're not coming home, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard. But then I think what helped was when you really start feeling like a part of your team.
Yeah.
Because those first couple weeks, you're the outsider. And everybody's like, are you going to make it or are you not going to make it? It's kind of that like, we want you here, but you got to prove that you're going to be here for the long run kind of thing. And once you get that acceptance, then you feel like, okay, I'm part of it. It's okay now.
Well,
but
and
I remember that first week was rough.
You have to be able to think about what you've done to prepare for that moment, too.
Yes.
It's like a lot of times you show up and it's new geography and it's like everything disappears,
Everybody's
right?
better than you in the gym.
Yeah. So
I
all
mean,
the skills
crazy.
you develop to get there, it's
Yeah.
like, you've trained for this marathon for a decade. Now you're on the start line, kind of thing, instead of it being the other way around of like, I've got nothing.
Yeah.
But it's scary. There's a lot of transition.
I've got to play devil's advocate for a second and have a conversation about, in particular, college athletics, because there's a lot of talk about hand-holding with student athletes, right? And I saw your face because it comes up and people say that. Are we helping student athletes too much by giving them all the tools and saying, this person's going to help you with this, this person's going to help you with this, this person's going to help you with this, instead of saying, this is what you need to do, and you've got to figure it out. They're sort of like, and it's an interesting question.
It is a very interesting question. Well, I don't think having resources, because every college student has multiple resources. Yeah. Some they don't even know about.
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
Right?
There's so many resources. I didn't realize until I was a coach.
Right.
Like from the student athlete perspective, I remember if you needed anything, right?
Right.
But then as a coach, it's like, how do you not see all these hundreds of things that are here, you know? But as a student athlete, I didn't search for any of that. It was like I went to practice, you know, hopefully I went to class and I did well in my classes and all those things. But
well, it's true. We find ourselves as faculty and as coaches reminding our students, our student athletes, about so many of the resources that are there for us. And it's okay to ask.
Yes.
It is okay to ask for assistance or when you're not clear. So I think there's there's certain, we have to lead with an expectation of accountability
Right.
for that student athlete, right?
That's so important.
You talked a little bit about ownership earlier, Blair, you know, with the contract, for example. So that, I think that initial conversation you talked about early in your career, right, at Penn State, that first week was tough. Yeah. Well, you know, the first few meetings, something about you, it's your ball, your responsibility, right? There's this clear and concise message that needs to be conveyed to every student athlete that's at the core of our list of goals or and expectations. So, yeah, you know, again, the uniqueness of each practitioner, of each coach, and when they feel it's necessary to reach out or to hold hands, as you say, I think that absolutely in some situations, for some individuals, we treat them differently, right?
Yeah.
Right, Kelly? I mean, as a therapist, we have to treat each person differently because they're presenting where they're coming from. We try to learn a little bit more about their background. You know, I mean, even in
Same
recruitment.
in the coach, right? As coaches, we treat every athlete differently on the court.
I always wanted to meet the guidance counselor when I was recruiting someone.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to learn a little more about that person. If we can, a significant faculty member,
Right.
they can talk a little bit about, you know, this person, we're recruiting them. We really appreciate their talent, their level, but is there anything you can tell us about, you know, what's best for them or how they cope, etc. So there's a lot to be said. I would venture to say a whole podcast, a whole session, but it's a very good question, and I'm not sure how Kelly feels about a little bit about this hand-holding.
Yeah, well, an analogy I use often is the student athletes can often feel like they're kind of down a rabbit hole, right? And so there's all these rungs of resources available to them that they can grab onto to climb out. Some of them have,
but they have to climb.
They have to climb, and some of them are more prepared to do that than others. So I feel like our role is to help to teach them how to climb, not to climb for them, right? And I think there's a significant, absolutely. They still have to grab onto the tools, right? Help pave the road for how they have those conversations. How do they seek out that support? What's the value in that support? Yeah. You know, to me, that's the value of our role is we're not teaching them anything if we, you know, do for them, but if we help them to understand how to do for themselves, right? Yeah. And when they're ready, they climb up and out, right? Yeah. So, and I think that's a really important piece. I think the perception. Yes. The perception is tough. But I mean,
which is why it's got to be brought up, right?
Yeah. I'll carry the flag all day, though, that if anybody that's, you know, sharing that feedback spends a day in the life of a student athlete, right? Yeah. They're going to be a pancake. Yeah. So, you know, it's a culture that, you know, is unlike anything else. And so, you know, it's, you know, a huge privilege and well earned for most of them. And it's also a grind. Yeah. So.
Well, and that question also makes me think about our function, our mission here at WNY Coaches, right? We're talking about the student athletes in this moment, but also the coaches. Right. Right. We they need to understand more. We as coaches, I'll speak for myself, I always want to learn more about the whole person. Yes. So what does that mean, Coach? What does that mean if we say, hey, these are these sports psychology tools, maybe that your traditional training you have yet to been exposed to. So we're bringing forward in due respect and keeping our distance with of their locker room, like you alluded to earlier, Kelly. Like we want to be sure to be respectful and help build a relationship of trust with the coaches as a sports psychology specialist. But some coaches are open arms. Some are a little more, tight-fisted with their locker room, so to speak. And it brings me to a place where we understand that our purpose here to help train and develop young coaches and then add to the skill set of more experienced coaches in the sports psychology realm. So I think it seems to tie together. I don't know if that makes sense,
Yes,
but it seems
it
to tie
does.
together there.
It does. And, and I said you treat every player differently. Treat's not the right word. Coach. You coach every player differently because you get to know them as a person. Just like you don't treat a conversation the same way with two of your friends if they went through something.
Right.
You would have two completely different conversations with two of your friends.
Sure.
Or two of your family members. Two people that you care about, that you know and actually know.
Right.
Right? You have to have different interactions with those people because they are different people.
Oh, yeah, like on the court, right? We're going
Yeah.
to challenge you in front of everybody, or it might not be that.
Right.
I might have to challenge you behind closed doors because that's how you need to be
Right.
responded to.
Right.
And that's what's best for you. Because in the end, the result is improvement and continuous improvement.
Yeah.
That's good. Kelly, we're winding down here, and if we can talk a little bit more about filling the psychological toolbox for our coaches. You've mentioned some things like mindfulness and know where your feet are. What was it?
Be where your feet are.
Be where your feet are. Beautiful. You got to get a T-shirt like that too.
So many
But,
T-shirts are coming out of this podcast.
Yeah,
We're gonna have a
we're
closet full.
We're gonna get our own silk screening machine.
Wait, what's the one? What's the one word that you want on there more than anything?
Yeah, quest for Gestalt.
There it is.
Come on.
Can we get a shirt that says "Be a Goldfish"? Yeah. Ted Lasso.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
10-second memory. I got
Yes.
that's good.
Yes.
That's really good. So yeah, if we can, and maybe we can all go around. We're talking about these a psychological toolbox for coaches, looking at a paradigm shift in coaching training, where many of us played the game we love, and that had opportunities to move into coaching that game. And then as we learn more and more, I mean, for myself, I ended up studying psychology and studying counseling at the graduate level right as I was starting my coaching career. And little did I know that was probably the greatest thing I ever did, because I understood a little more about myself, about the uniqueness, as you say, Blair, of each of us, and human behavior, and how that affects our energy and focus.
Right.
So if we can all just talk a little bit about that psychological toolbox, and I don't know who wants to start.
Kelly, go ahead.
Okay.
I think we want to hear from Kelly.
All right. Foundation of the pyramid, 100% is confidence, right? So I think a huge goal in helping our coaches to come along is, how do they show up to their athletes as their true selves, so that they can be confident in what they bring to their athletes, because, as vulnerable,
So hard.
right, as they can be, the athletes are going to thrive on that, right? And confidence just being that true belief that you have what you need in the moment to overcome that task that's in front of you, right? And so how do you bring that out in every single athlete, and what is that special sauce with every one of your athletes? And that's the foundation of the pyramid, and then from there you can build your skill sets, setting effective goals and doing mental rehearsal where you're actually seeing good outcomes happen because you're confident, right? So we're not reeling through mistakes, and being able to just sort of stack things on top when you are instilling that confidence in your athletes.
I mean, that's really like you're building a culture through that, right? And so when we, my former two assistants, I won't name them, but I almost just did. Sorry, guys. When we were really talking about how we wanted to change the culture at UB, that was something that I became really passionate about, was how can we take these 4 years for these young athletes and make them something special that builds their confidence going into life, right? Like, look what we did there. I can do anything was really what we were trying to accomplish,
so powerful.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it was rough. I mean, we started and we just had to keep staying positive, but also just like we're building. This is a process, which was really, really hard. Not only for the athletes, right? Because they're not always seeing the process as much as we were. But, for the coaching staff, you just want to be like, it's working, you're doing it, but trying to get that belief took time and took years, not just a couple weeks. And so it's like committing to the long game, I think, for coaches. It's not always going to be a 2-week thing or somebody's not going to click like that the first time you show them how to shoot a ball every time. It's like you've got to keep putting the time in. And it's exhausting, but it's totally worth it when you see them get it.
Yeah, and good for you and your staff to come together with that common goal at the core of who you are and achieving that identity.
Yeah, crazy, but great.
Yeah, you've often said it was a great experience, and I know the program is thriving as we speak with one of your colleagues in charge. If I have it right.
Yep, he's doing a great job.
That's great. Well, I think although we can go on and on, our listeners certainly have had enough. Our production assistants, Jackson and Anthony, want to thank them here at Medaille College to help us move our message forward to everyone. We'll be back next week. Western New York Coaches Chalk Talk signing off.